This is Optimal Relationships Daily, episode 1908, Sharing Yourself Without Worrying About Being Accepted, by Erin Lanahan with tinybuddha.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of ORD. I'm your host and narrator, Greg Audino. Grateful to be back here with you once again, and this time ready to read a post courtesy of tinybuddha.com, which is a blog we love reading from and is so incredibly well aligned with our entire network of shows. This time, let's see what one of their contributors, Erin Lanahan, has to say about acceptance and sharing more of yourself as we optimize your life. Sharing Yourself Without Worrying About Being Accepted, by Erin Lanahan with tinybuddha.com. Quote, happiness is really a deep, harmonious inner satisfaction and approval. That's by Francis Wilshire. Acceptance. This is a word we often toss around, but what does it truly mean? Perhaps the meaning of it ultimately resides within its beholder. I know I've certainly achieved my own understanding of what acceptance means to me and for me, and so far, this definition is ever evolving. On November 6, 2013, I returned to the United States after having lived in Australia for 2.5 years. I spent the majority of my time there studying and practicing yoga, and teaching yoga and meditation. As a teacher, I had to face my attachment to the experience my students had or did not have. I feared that I would not be good enough, that somehow they would find fault in my delivery, and that I would ultimately not be accepted. Now, let's be clear. This fear was not new fear. It had haunted me all my life. Becoming a yoga and meditation teacher was just one of the divine blessings that brought this fear to the surface for me to clear and overcome, like nothing had been able to before it. At the end of last year, I traveled to the Oneness University in India. For 31 days, we went through many classes, ancient rituals, and ceremonies, and had an abundance of time and opportunity to see ourselves clearly. The monks lovingly guided us to look at our unconscious fear, pain, suffering, and inauthentic actions. This was extremely confronting, because most of us had no idea we were operating on a level of such fear. After that, I went back to Australia and spent the next 5 months falling apart as I became aware of so much inner dissatisfaction and disapproval. Holy moly, I sometimes wondered if I would ever come through it. During this time, I did some coaching with a woman named Jackson Brooke. In our initial consultation, it became clear how much I longed to feel like I fit somewhere, like I belonged, like I was completely accepted. She helped me see how I'd been going about this with external efforts. I thought that if I could up my career game, or perhaps if I moved back to America or got married, then maybe I would fit in. The truth was, I suffered from internal rejection and an inability to feel like what I was offering, who I was, and where I was at in my life were good enough. Awareness is the most effective tool for helping me shift from fear to love, from criticism to compassion, and from conditional to unconditional love. Awakening begins with seeing. Once I became aware of the way I am currently operating, meaning I can see the inner critic, the judgments, the fear, and the stories, the awareness alone brings light to the darkness, or consciousness to the unconscious. This brings about an automatic shift in perception. So for me, inner satisfaction and approval depend on my level of inner awareness. Between working with Jackson and watching a TED Talk by Brené Brown on vulnerability, I began to experience a profound shift. There was a specific message that I received, and that message was this: acceptance comes as a result of sharing what's in our hearts, regardless of the outcome. And it clicked. I understood that acceptance was no one else's responsibility. It was my own. The first step toward it was vulnerability. Vulnerability is courageous. Courage comes from the Latin word cor, which means heart. I began to share what was in my heart, regardless of the outcome, in my classes, with my boyfriend, with my clients, with my friends, in my articles, and I began to experience something beautiful. Showing up and sharing was no longer about the feedback or responses I got from others. It was about me doing my part. It was about showing up as the best version of myself, without hiding the things I assumed other people wouldn't love. I began to apply this into my daily life as a spiritual practice. I began to give fully, to speak my truth openly, to share what was in my heart each day, regardless of the outcome. And I experienced the joy of connecting with people like never before. I was no longer trying to be perfect, but rather letting them see me exactly the way I was. I was finally able to see my boyfriend through loving eyes, becoming aware of everything that was awesome about him, instead of picking out what was wrong about him. I was able to share, personally and professionally, from a place of authenticity and vulnerability. I was no longer taking responsibility for what others did or did not get from my sharing, because I knew my only job was to generously and unconditionally give what sat in my heart, and to surrender the rest. As a result, my relationships became even more powerful, even more mutually nourishing, and even more effective. Everything began to flow in abundant ways after this awareness blossomed within me, which has been a huge help for me now that I'm back in the US and spending time with family. Our loved ones have the ability to show us our deepest, darkest corners of insecurity, self-judgments, and inner disapproval. As a result, we typically end up pointing the finger at them and complaining about how imperfect they are. This trip home has been different for me than trips in the past. I've always assumed my family thinks certain things, that they judge me, or that they're disappointed in me for not being what they may have wanted me to be. Now, however, when I see myself in conversations with them and the old programs come up, telling these stories of their disapproval of me, in that moment, I can soften. I can recognize the pain that is present in all of us at that moment. I can have compassion for them and myself. I can reaffirm that I know who I am. I know what I've achieved in my life. And I know what amazing things I'm up to. And therefore, I don't have to demand their approval. I can consciously choose to let go of the old stories, the boxes that I've put us in, the need to prove anything. And instead, I can re-examine things with fresh eyes that have only one goal: to love myself and them. Even if my assumptions about my family were right, which is unlikely, with inner satisfaction and approval, I can still be happy and okay in the face of other people who may think, feel, and see things differently than I do. Awareness is what opens the pair of internal eyes that we need to see what's going on inside of us. Awareness will shine the inner flashlight on the internal fear and criticism. It will show us where we are currently operating and offer us the opportunity to upgrade. I'm not inviting you to fix or change yourself. I simply invite you to turn on the flashlight within and see what happens. I invite you to become willing to surrender to the process that will follow such awareness, and to stay committed to your intention to accept yourself and others. You just listened to the post titled, Sharing Yourself Without Worrying About Being Accepted, by Erin Lanahan with tinybuddha.com.
ABC Wednesdays.
Celebrity Jeopardy is back.
Damn! Look at that!
Hosted by me, Ken Jennings.
Yeah!
A new season of Powerhouse Celebrities compete
Go big or go home.
to win $1 million for charity.
When celebrities take the Jeopardy stage, anything can happen.
Bet it on!
What is zombie? What is
Arctic?
What is the incorrect answer to this question?
Celebrity Jeopardy in prime time. Wednesdays on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by Pete's. Few things start your day better than a good coffee. That's why Pete's hand roasts their coffee from a specific selection of high-quality beans. And they don't just put those beans into anyone's hands. Pete's trains their roasters for 10,000 hours so they can master the roast that gives you the most. Pete's Coffee. Coffee for coffee people. Find Pete's online or at your local retailer.
And thanks a lot to Erin for that. The journey from Australia to India and back to the US does sound like quite a roller coaster of self-discovery. What struck me the most, though, was not the exotic locations or the rites and rituals, but the idea that acceptance begins at home, within ourselves. For many, the quest for validation is constant, often stemming from childhood memories, past relationships, or even like workplace dynamics. But this article serves as a beautiful reminder that the path to true happiness is not about curating a certain life or masking our flaws, but embracing them. It's about understanding that acceptance is not handed out by others, but rather it's crafted within us. I think many of us also related quite well when Erin touched upon family's power to dredge up insecurities. It's a universal experience, but the switch in perspective from seeking their validation to offering love, that's really empowering. So if you are waiting for someone to turn on the light and guide you, chances are you've been holding that flashlight all along. Just flick it on and see the difference. Time to get going for now, everybody. But I thank you so much for being here, as always, and doing right by your relationships today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and be sure to come on back tomorrow for more ORD, where your optimal life awaits.